Hey guys, welcome into the Bear With Us podcast. I'm Jack. He is Frank. As always, we are here to talk a little bit about NFL offseason transactions. We got some quarterback signings. We got some deals that didn't happen. We got some franchise tags. We got some not franchise tags that might actually help the Bears out a little bit. And then we do want to go ahead and go over our 2023 NFL rookie quarterback rankings before we get into the draft season correctly here, I guess. We just had the combine, so we have a little bit better of an idea of some of these prospects. But should be a fun show, Frank. Let's start with the biggest name that didn't happen. Or you know what? No, let's go over the ones that we know about. They're signed, good to go. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that impacts some of the other quarterbacks and quarterbacks going into the future because man, Daniel Jones getting fucking paid. But let's start with the obvious one. Derek Carr getting signed to the New Orleans Saints. I think it was like 4 years, $150 million. I had predicted he'd go to the Saints. It just always kind of felt like an obvious fit. Frank, how do you feel about the money? You feel like the money is pretty accurate for Derek Carr?
Yeah, I mean that's just what starting quarterbacks make now. I mean that number just continues to shoot up. We'll obviously get to it when we get to Daniel Jones, but like the importance of that position, especially for a team that feels like they're just an average quarterback away. You look at someone like the Jets as well, who were in on him. They're going to pay a handsome sum. I mean, we've seen this with Kirk Cousins. Granted, he's more of like a fringe top 10, top 12 guy. So not just average, but yeah, the money was about right. I was a little bit shocked that it was the Saints because very early on, they courted him when he was still on the Raiders roster. And the report came out pretty immediately after the dinner that they had that it just was a no-go. Like, he's not going to be going there. And that, to me, like, when we were making our predictions, I was like, okay, because I want to, if I'm remembering right, it was Derek Carr who said no. He's like, nah, this just isn't the situation for me. Whatever changed, I don't know if it was the money or what, or if the Jets just weren't willing to do that, or maybe he didn't want to wait on the Aaron Rodgers decision or whatever. But that line of thinking, though, or I don't even know what the right word is, that like development is making me sort of change my tune a little bit about what may be happening with Lamar Jackson, who we'll get to. But all in all, the money was not surprising. And I mean, that was one thing I did agree with you on, is I do think that was the best fit for him. The only two fits that I really saw were them or the Jets.
Yeah, I just think like for that offense, for how it looked with a much, in my opinion, a much worse quarterback at this stage than Andy Dalton. I mean, it's a clear upgrade for me. So I think that offense could actually be pretty entertaining to watch. And he's by far now the best quarterback in the NFC South, depending, of course, what happens in the draft. But I don't really think it's all that close, which is, why I was talking about kind of wanting him to go to Tampa Bay, because that felt like a sort of even more win now situation. It's just, it's so weird to me that the Saints, regardless of how much money they have in dead cap, like they just continue to be able to pump these contracts out. Like, it's insane. It's absolutely insane how they just refuse to blow this thing up. And it's not like a Band-Aid thing either. They've Derek Carr for 4 years now. It's not going to be like 2 years and then, we'll see what happens. Like it's signaling that this is going to be their direction for a while. It's crazy.
I mean, I've been on board with them blowing it all up for like 2 years now. I was all for the first year of Jameis Winston. Like, let's just give it a go post Drew Brees. Once that experiment failed, to me, it was time to blow it all up. The thing is, I'm surprised more NFL teams aren't faster to blow things up, which some are, but you would think like most should be, because it's not as hard to rebuild in the NFL as it is in other leagues. Like, you're like, what, 4 or 5 blue chip prospects away from being a really good team. Like, quarterback will still always matter to be elite for a while, but I'm just saying, like, look at what the Jets did last year. They did all that basically without a quarterback.
See, and that's my thing. That's how I've always sort of, and honestly, it's like kind of what originally like what sold me on, Phil Emery and Ryan Pace in their in the beginning, because they both talked about how they were just going to keep drafting quarterbacks regardless of what they have and what they might not have. And I've always been for like you're absolutely correct. Blowing it up in the NFL is a lot easier than it is basketball or baseball, because there's always going to be a quarterback at the top of the draft, unless you're just super unlucky and you're drafting in the 2022 draft and there's just Kenny Pickett and that's about it. Like, you can just keep losing. Like like even, and we'll talk about it a little bit when we get to Daniel Jones, because I want to talk about how that sort of impacts guys like Justin Fields. Brian Poles basically, he can basically buy himself more time by building around Justin Fields, saying, you know what, he's not the guy. We still have all these picks at the top of the draft. Let's go ahead and get someone else. Like that can be a way to sustain, longevity and building a team. One other guy I wanted to touch on, Frank, real quick, because it's not much to say, is the Geno Smith deal. 3-year, $105 million deal for Geno Smith to return to the Seattle Seahawks. If I remember correctly, I think we both had him returning to Seattle. Is that correct?
Yeah. To me, it just made too much sense. They're still not out on rookie quarterbacks this year or next year. I think that they'll, continue to scout, which will, once we talk about the rookies later in this episode, I'll sort of get to my philosophy with a couple of them. But yeah, the money made sense. The landing spot made sense. Their situation makes sense. I mean, Geno, again, he's exactly what Pete wants in a quarterback. Like, he's a really good game manager. He's going to make timely throws. He's going to play within himself and not, try to do too much cooking. And it made complete sense to a point where it's like, even if you're Geno, not like from the loyalty aspect of like, well, they gave me the shot or anything like that, but just like, who else can you, like, let's say you tested the market. I don't know if you even get that money elsewhere. I think everyone looks at that scenario, like same thing with Daniel Jones. Like, if he tests the market, he's not getting that money, but it's like, let's come to an agreement because we just fit each other in what we're trying to do. It was a very glove in hand fit for me.
It's just so insane that Geno Smith got $105 million. Like, that's, I mean, you think about how everybody, including you and I, were talking about him last year, and that situation in Seattle where it's like him or Drew Lock, people in Dynasty are trading fucking Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf like they're fucking hotcakes, and boom, he ends up throwing, what was it, like 4,000 yards, 30+ touchdowns? Like, he had more of a career year than Daniel Jones did, and Daniel Jones got paid even more money, which is absolutely insane to me. But good for Geno. Can't be mad about that contract. Like you said, I think it's a good fit for Seattle. But what you are starting to see, Frank, is that quarterbacks starting to get that money even more so. Like that. Yeah, we were you and I were sort of flabbergasted last year when Aaron Rodgers got the $50 million deal, and like you look at it this year and it's like, yeah, it's still an absurd amount of money and percentage-wise of the cap, but you look at some of the other quarterbacks, and it's hard not to argue that Aaron Rodgers probably deserved $50 million a year when you compare it to some of the numbers that these guys are getting. I mean,
which is why it's like, it's hard for me to even judge the Danny Dimes deal. I on its face, I don't think he's worth, what did he wind up getting, 42 yearly?
It was, let me see.
It was something like that. But the exact number is besides the point while you look for it. But they did the same thing when the Bears paid Jay Cutler, where it's like, oh my God, like he's making $27 million. And in the first year, he was like the highest or second highest paid quarterback. But then it even like that number became the middle ground for what starting quarterbacks were making. And these higher numbers just signify to me that like they're forecasting future CBAs, they're forecasting future caps, and this is the average quarterback range. And then you can make the argument that Daniel Jones is a below average quarterback. That's fine, but they paid him like an average one. That just, it looks crazy right now, but it won't be once other quarterbacks get paid.
Yeah, Daniel Jones, I think it was like 4 years. Well, it must have been, oh my God, I'm so bad at math, Frank. God, what was it, like 160 mil? Yeah, 160 mil, wasn't it? Something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Ridiculous number. Like, yeah, 4-year, $160 million deal, 40 mil a year.
I do know that they have an
obviously,
out after 2 years though. It's not. It wasn't like the whole thing was. I forgot how much guaranteed money it was.
yeah, I think it was like 86 million was guaranteed.
And
so,
I think it's only guaranteed in the first 2
like,
years because it was still 40 a year. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's.
It's just Frank. Like, come on, man. Like, Daniel Jones is not he did not have a bad season. Absolutely not. You will not convince me that he had a bad season last year. But the man threw 15 touchdowns. And I know people are going to come and say, well, he ran for 7. And that's great, but that's still only 22 touchdowns. Like, Frank, here's the thing. And a lot of people are saying this, and it's just something I personally don't agree with in terms of how the Giants kind of hammered this out. They basically, obviously, if they had that option to do the 5th-year option, right? If that was still in play, they absolutely would have done the 5th-year option this year or last year if they knew that Daniel Jones was capable of this. But they basically skipped the franchise tag part so that they could franchise tag Saquon Barkley because, like, Daniel Jones's stats without Saquon Barkley are like insanely worse. Like I'll try and find it. I glanced at it on Twitter the other day, but like that was basically why they did it. They had to use the franchise tag on Saquon Barkley because they didn't want to pay him. So instead they hammer out this just ridiculous deal for Daniel Jones to basically be able to keep Saquon. I don't know. It's such a weird thing because Saquon is important. I think it's kind of like the Geno Smith thing to me, where it's like Saquon is almost all of his value comes from the Giants. Like, I think he's a good player, and I think he could succeed elsewhere. But, like, I don't know. It's just so weird to me that Daniel Jones got $160 million. That's crazy.
It is. I mean, especially when you consider the track record of quarterbacks who did not get their 50-year exercised. Like, he may be the only one that's ever gotten a contract afterwards.
I think he was like set to be the youngest player to ever be franchise tagged. I think he's still only like 25. Or I should say youngest quarterback to be franchise tagged. It's just like, man, okay, here we go. I found it. It's from NFL on CBS. So Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones together. Daniel Jones has a pass touchdown interception ratio of 44-17, 6.9 yards per attempt, and a 91.4 passer rating. Without Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones is 16 for 17 touchdown to interception ratio, 6.2 yards per attempt, and a 77.3 passer rating.
That's pretty drastic.
Man, and you gave somebody fucking $160 million.
But you know what though? Like, stats aside, because I know he statistically didn't have a great year last year, obviously. It's hard for me to not think that he hit a ceiling, right? Like, I don't. Does he get much better than what he's shown you? Like, because that usually that's part of what you're paying for too, which again, if this winds up just being the average quarterback, I do think he's an average, maybe a tick below average starting quarterback. But yeah, I don't know. It is a little perplexing because I just don't see him getting much better. Sure, can he have a year with where he's statistically better because of situations around him, better receivers, lean on the run game more. Sure, like his stats can look better. I'm talking about him. Can he be better than this? I don't think so.
I mean, you look at, I guess the one positive, one in the many positives in terms of growth for Daniel Jones last year was the cut down in, overall throughout his career, how much he's really cut out the turnovers. Like, you think of 19 fumbles in his rookie season, he only coughed up the ball 6 times. He ran for 700 yards with 7 touchdowns, like I mentioned. That's great. That's really, really good, especially in this era where you do value a more mobile quarterback. And just because he doesn't, necessarily look like the most mobile guy in the world, that's always been one of his biggest skill sets, has been running the football. And then you look at just sort of his passing numbers in terms of, he only had 5 interceptions last year. Like, that's really, really good. But again, he only threw 15 touchdowns. Like his completion percentage has gone up every year. His turnovers have gone down. Like it's everything you want from a young quarterback in terms of improvement. But I agree with you, Frank. Like his ceiling can't be much higher, right? Like unless
That's the way that I feel. Yeah.
Unless Dable is able to unlock just like this unreal, like he just unlocks the ceiling that we've never seen before from Daniel Jones. But like what what kind of season do you call success for him? Like 20 plus touchdowns and 5 rushing touchdowns? That's to me, that's average.
That's what I was just gonna say. Like I don't see him throwing consistently for 30 plus touchdowns. Like that's what you want out of your franchise guy, right? Is like you're shooting for 30 touchdowns if you can stay healthy for a year. Even like 30 total. I don't know if he can get to 30 total. How many? Would he have 6 rushing touchdowns? Yeah.
7.
I don't know. 7.
7 last year.
So you're talking about if he can keep that up, or let's just like say it's 5. Can he get 25 tossing and 5 rushing? Again, maybe, because like stats can be a little bit malleable, but yeah, I don't know. I was certainly perplexed.
You look at a guy like Dak Prescott, who everybody says is overpaid. He's only thrown less than 20 touchdowns once, and that was when he tore his knee. Like he's thrown 30 touchdowns, then 9, obviously with the injury, and then 37 the next year. 23 last year. Dak, I wouldn't necessarily say is the best comparison, but like I would take Dak Prescott over Daniel Jones at this point if I'm trying to win. Because the Giants they're not in a position where they're like truly rebuilding because of, again, what a great job Brian Dable did with that team.
Coach of the year, Brian Dable.
Coach of the year.
Put some fucking respect on his name, Jack.
He must think Daniel Jones can take another step.
Yeah,
he must think
but again, the other thing is too is there, because he did such a good job coaching. Realistic, what is your move to move away from him? Because maybe it's Lamar, but that situation is sticky. You don't just let Daniel Jones negotiate with others. He may take something out. It's like, again, if I was a Giants fan, I would have been pissed about last year. I would have rather have won 4 games and had a higher draft pick. But they are where they are now. They have to surround him with talent and see if they got it. Because realistically, what you're doing is extending his leash by 2 more years. Because it's only 2 years of guaranteed money.
Are you telling me you would you be rooting for losses? How fucking dare you?
Yes, I would have been.
Call yourself a fan, huh? What, you want what's best for the team overall in the future?
I do.
Pathetic. You fit right in with the Ravens then, Frank. I guess the opposite. You don't fit in with the Ravens. Let's just talk about the obvious one. Lamar Jackson getting franchise tagged. I think it's like, 32, close-ish, $32 million if he plays on it. But it's the non-exclusive franchise tag. So he can talk with any team he wants. Any team can send him an offer. The Ravens can match any offer. If they don't, they get 2 first-round picks. Man, fuck the franchise tag. What fucking garbage. It's the worst. Like, the NFL does contracts almost better than every other league. Except for that. It's like, to me, the franchise tag upsets me in the way that, and you know this better than anyone, Frank, the NBA putting protections on picks. It's like, come on, man. Like,
yeah.
What the fuck are we doing here? It takes away so much from the players' powers because, you and I were looking at the free agency list at the beginning of 2023, like the beginning of the season, and we're like, okay, who are some guys, next year that we can really look to sign? We'll have $100 million, but that's never a guarantee because you don't know who's going to be fucking franchise tagged. It could be up to 7 years of the franchise tag. You're with that team because they can tag you twice. So it's just like, I hate the franchise tag, and it sucks for Lamar Jackson. Where did we go from here, Frank? Where do you think this all ends up? Is Lamar going to be back with the Ravens? Is he going to be moving on? I mean, no, teams apparently just aren't interested. according
Yeah,
to everybody's reports.
I feel like there's so many layers to this, Jack. And I don't even know like really where to start. So it may just sound like we're all over the place with the Lamar Jackson conversation. Um, One, my underlying belief is that if he had an agent, he would have had a deal already. It wouldn't have come to this. He would have had a deal last year probably. Because the one thing that's been pretty consistent, and this is probably the Ravens giving this to the media to like add pressure on him, is that he's literally not negotiated. He's given his number and that's been that. There is no like, I'm starting here and I can meet you here. It's been, this is what I want, which fair game. You were unanimous MVP. You're one of the most electrifying players in the game. If you feel that way about yourself, I totally get it. And with that, I think has also come owners and front offices, in particular the Ravens here, talking to other front offices of like, this guy is hard to deal with because he does not have an agent. So I don't know if you call that blackballing or just honesty, or if they're embellishing, it can be to a point of blackballing. But if they're being honest and he's been hard to deal with, owners talk to each other. People talk to it. They just had a whole combine convention where, you know, front offices are meeting face to face. So like these conversations come up. It's a real thing. Now, as it pertains to other teams not wanting him or just like sort of saying that they're out, this is where I sort of harken back to the Derek Carr to the Saints thing. They shot that down immediately, or he did, I think, and he wound up signing there. So part of my brain is like, what is the smokescreen here with other teams? Because there's no fucking way that Washington isn't salivating at the mouth to try to get someone at quarterback as talented as Lamar Jackson. Like, they have a young defense that's on the rise. They have really good weapons on offense in Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin. The running back room seems to be set. You can't tell me that, you know, Lamar doesn't look good on that team. I did see a report, and this makes a ton of sense, that teams feel at this point that they're just going to be negotiating for the Ravens, that the Ravens and Lamar have hit a wall. Now that he'll be able to see what his real value is from another team, the Ravens are simply just going to match it and say, okay, you found what your value was. Let's do it. Like, we're writing the contract for you. We're doing the work for you. That makes sense. The other play, though, to me, that doesn't involve like any sort of collusion. Collusion's on the table. I hope I've like made that clear that could be a thing as well. I think they're playing hardball right now, or they could be, these other teams, so that to make sure that that's not the case. I'm not going to jump right on it and like know that the firsts are on the table and know that, you know, I'm going to pay you 250 million guaranteed, just for the Ravens to match that. So I almost wonder, are they throwing that out there to add pressure on the Ravens, where it's like, if you're going to sign him, do it on your own. But if not, once you continue to argue and the relationship is mended, like it's not mended, it's done, then we'll come in and we'll talk. That would make more sense to me versus them just being out right away. Because that, if teams are truly out right now, something's up. And I know people have tried to add in like the racial component to it. You can never say no to that, because no, there's never gonna be like flat in your face evidence in a case like this, unless there's like emails that come out that literally say like, we don't want a black quarterback or something like that. But yeah, I mean, you would think that the Ravens are doing some sort of smearing on the backside of things with other owners and front offices for people to just be out who are in desperate need of a quarterback, and there's like a 26-year-old MVP, unanimous MVP, you know, waiting to be had.
Here's my like, I guess my concern in terms of Lamar Jackson, because like, you know, we were just giving Daniel Jones a bunch of shit for his touchdown totals. Like Lamar Jackson, you look at his season last year, and you know, it was only in 12 games versus Daniel Jones in 16 games. So obviously, like a month more long of games. So I'm not saying Lamar Jackson had a Daniel Jones season, but here's the problem. A guy who played worse than or equal to you in more amount of games just got $40 million per year. Just got $160 million. What is Lamar worth at this point? Because like he may think he's worth 50 mil a year like Aaron Rodgers. I would disagree. I would be on the Ravens side. Kyler Murray got $46 million. That's probably the range of where Lamar is at. What Kyler got 5 years, $230 million. I think that's probably around where Lamar Jackson should be. I think that's probably fair. But the problem is like the Ravens haven't given him the tools to really be worth more. They don't give him wide receivers. And they're basically in the same position the Bears are, where they have nothing at wide receiver and there's really no clear path to upgrade this offseason. So what do you really do? Do you want to give that contract? Do you want to give 5 years, $230 million to a guy who's only played 24 games in the last 2 seasons and is looked at as a running quarterback? You know, I agree with you. You've said this numerous times, and I agree. Lamar Jackson is a much better passer than people give him credit for. No doubt about it. But the Ravens aren't giving him the tools to really prove that. So,
yeah, I think
I don't know, man. I don't know how much he's really worth.
I push back on a couple of things. One, he's better than Kyler. I think he's a better player than Kyler is. So I think that's where negotiations get like a little tricky, is that's what they do. They look at other people's money and say, if he got that, I deserve this.
Especially for a guy, just to jump in, especially for a guy who does not have an agent, like you mentioned.
Especially that, because again, like what agents can do, and we've touched on this when Roquan was here, agents have this innate ability. I mean, they go to school for this and they get savvy and have relationships with people, but even if it's like funny money, but the headline's going to say that I got more, or like incentives can push me to get more. Like they have a way of not harming their players' egos, but also getting the team what they want as well. But I think the second thing is, man, and I feel like me and you maybe have texted about this. I don't know if we ever talked about this on the actual podcast. I like the weapons on Baltimore. And I don't think, like, it seems to be the argument of like, oh, you either think that the weapons are awful and like they're doing Lamar wrong, or the weapons are really good and Lamar just holds them back. I don't think it's neither. I honestly think that Greg Roman just stopped becoming productive there. I think what made them successful in the first couple of years of Lamar being in Baltimore, with that whole shift of like we're trying to power offense and like run heavy, and then we sort of coupled that MVP year with, you know, insane, at least touchdowns wise, like in the pocket stuff, because we were able to buy him time. It never advanced past that. Like it just became very stale. Like part of me wants to just see him go back there with a new offensive coordinator, hopefully with a different philosophy. I'm not familiar with, you know, the philosophy that their new OC has, but like, because I do think it was the offensive coordinator's problem. I think it was a coaching staff problem. They didn't, it never looked like they were trying to run a pro offense. Like it looked like they were running Pop Warner half the time. And again, like it was maybe necessary when he wasn't as advanced of a passer in his first couple of years, but he's a much better passer now. Like stop playing high school football and like, let's welcome him to the big leagues, because he's here. But that's like my ultimate point with all of it. Like that's why I'm really, whether it's Baltimore or not, I want him to be in a scenario in which the offense is an actual NFL offense, because I think he can and is prepared to run that. But again, this whole thing, I think it all comes down to him not having an agent. And I don't know, it's probably a blend of all of these things that I'm about to name. But because I was going to say was, I don't know if it's just because teams don't like negotiating with just the players for X amount of reasons, or players just aren't, you know, what is the right word? Like educated enough, savvy enough, like with like literal contracts and MOUs and things that you have to sign, like things that you have to go over, legal language that they didn't go to school for more times than not. It's not that they're dumb by any means. It's just that this is not your lane. Like you don't always understand legal contract. Like legal terminology and contracts are extremely specific for a reason, and they can mean like drastically different things if you just swap out a word that's a synonym for another word. It can mean something totally different now. You know what I mean? Like and I'm not acting like I know any of this. I just saw a documentary about Big Pharma that was like talking about all this and like how wild it is in courtrooms with literally just changing a word. to change a whole law for things. Like it gets very, very sticky, but just get an agent, man. I mean, because more times than not, and I don't want to harp on this point too much, but you're having a legal team look over the contract anyway, but you just want to be at the negotiation table. Get an agent that'll allow you to just sit in on the meetings. Like that's not abnormal. Like that can be a thing, but yeah, there's a lot of layers to this. There's a lot at play. Part of me also thinks, Jack, and it's not to continue down this rabbit hole because we may need to push our rookie quarterback rankings to next week. We're rolling in deep here, but part of me feels like also the Browns sort of fucked this up for a lot of people, Lamar included, because they gave the guaranteed contract to the wrong guy. And now I think other teams, I think that's also scaring away other teams that Lamar's demands is to be fully guaranteed, which I'm all for. I think he's earned that. The injuries the last couple of years do him no favors, but we saw what his ceiling is, his MVP year. That's worthy of a guaranteed contract. But agreed. I think the Browns fucked that up for him. I'm going to be honest. I think that's at play here as well.
Yeah, I think, ceiling is kind of what we were talking about with Daniel Jones. And like with Lamar, when everything is working correctly, you see the real talent, forget the playoff stuff. That's a whole different conversation. But man, like I just don't know where this goes from here because, if teams feel like they're just negotiating on behalf of the Ravens, because again, the Ravens can match any contract that Lamar Jackson receives. Why would if you're a team that is in the middle of your offseason, right? Like the draft is coming up, free agency is about to start. Why would you spend X amount of time basically doing another team's work for them?
Yeah.
To maybe not even get the player you spend all of the time to do. He's a great player, but if you don't feel confident that you can get a deal done, what's the point? Why even bother? Why not just let him play on the tag, and then if he becomes a free agent, do it then? You know what I mean? Like I just the Ravens have really put him in a shitty situation. And again, I this is why I hate the franchise tag. It's so much power to the teams versus the player. It's just it creates such an imbalance. Like they chose to not give Daniel Jones the 5th-year option. The team chose that. And then they're basically like, here's the deal, agree to it or we're going to franchise tag you. And he was like, what? Like, no, fuck you. And then, it became this whole thing. And it ended up with him getting top 10 quarterback money, which, or I think it's like, God, I think he's like top 6. Yeah, he's like tied with Dak and Matt Stafford in terms of total annual value. He's number 6. He's the number 6 quarterback in the NFL in terms of total cash compensation. Like that's fucking crazy. That's crazy to me. That's insane. But for Lamar's side of it, it's like, where do you go from here? Because, you look at the value that some of the other guys signed, Patrick Mahomes, $450 million over 10 years. I think you and I both can agree that Lamar Jackson will not get a 10-year deal. Like that's just I think that's a once in a lifetime contract.
I was just going to say that you're talking about generational, and it's not to say that what Lamar can do on a football field isn't special. It is. Pat is the best quarterback I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. So that's a contract that only goes to him. Like to a point, like where you don't even what we were talking about earlier of like, oh well, he's making this, I'm better than him. He's God tier. Like you ever feel that way about like if you're like ranking something where it's like maybe TV shows? I do this sometimes with like TV shows where I'm like, to me, Breaking Bad is one. I'm not even gonna rank them because they're that good. Like they're above rankings. They're above, you know what I mean? Like, or even like in rap conversations, I'll be like, well, these 3 are my guys. I don't even rank them because they're like above this ranking. Like that's what Pat's contract is. You don't even compare. But again, the comparison became Deshaun Watson.
Right. Exactly. So what I would probably do if I was the Ravens, I would probably offer 5 years, $250 million. Because I mean that puts him 5 years, $250 million. Not. It's
that I think that's the hang up though, Jack. That's the decision that has to be made. He's not going unless it's all guaranteed.
Okay, so speaking from a team perspective, because I think we're talking about it, strictly from the player side, from Lamar's side. From the Ravens, if I'm the GM of the Ravens, I really don't feel all that good about giving that type of guaranteed money to Lamar Jackson. I don't, if you're comparing him to Deshaun Watson, obviously, yes, Lamar Jackson, of course, would deserve fully guaranteed money. He's as good a player, if not better, than Deshaun Watson. But with the injury stuff, with the style play that he has, I personally would not feel comfortable giving him that fully guaranteed contract because it's putting my team in, my team's future at risk. But again, it sort of also goes back to what you were saying with Daniel Jones, where it's like, okay, what do you do then? Where do you go without Lamar Jackson? What's the plan? The whole thing was, oh, well, they'll trade with Atlanta. They'll get the 8th pick. They'll trade up to get one of the quarterbacks. But if the other teams aren't interested because you put on this fucking franchise tag that, again, would basically be making other teams do the work for you, and no one's having those conversations, what do you do then? What do you do? You're just going to sit with him at the franchise tag at 31 mil? And then what?
I think the other thing, though, if we take that component away, let's say you're another team. Let's say you are Atlanta. Let's say that portion of it is gone. The Ravens tell you, Jack Savio, the GM and owner of the Atlanta Falcons, they say, we're not going to match. We're done. You negotiate with him. You get the number. Then you send us the 2 firsts. You send us 1/8 and a 24, or maybe even a 25. Maybe we're feeling generous here. You as the other team, are you doing that? Are you, forget the money portion. It's more about the first. Are you trading 2 firsts if you can come to a financial agreement with Lamar Jackson for Lamar?
I would heavily consider it because, again, teams like Atlanta, you're at the eighth spot. There's no guarantee you're going to be able to trade up to get, I guess it depends how much you believe in, like, Desmond Ridder, what do you think his ceiling is? I don't think it's Lamar Jackson.
Right.
But it's, we've seen it, right? These quarterbacks, you have to have one to be truly competitive in the NFL year in and year out to win a Super Bowl. I would probably consider it. I'd probably consider giving up 2 firsts.
I don't see how you don't. And the reason why I asked that is because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter try to play the flip side and just say, like, well, I'm not giving up 2 firsts for Lamar. There's been much worse players that have gone for that. Stafford went for all, and that's not to say Stafford's bad. Prime for prime, talent for talent, I'm taking Lamar over Matt Stafford. Like, I think, just as a total package, I think Matt Stafford's arm talent may be better.
I think that's disrespectful to Matt Stafford.
You think to take Lamar over him?
Yeah.
I don't think it's disrespectful.
No, it's not. I was just trying to give you shit, but no, I would probably take Matt Stafford over.
Oh no,
Lamar.
And that's fine. But
I know what you're saying.
No, no matter how you slice it,
I'd take him over Dak.
I would too. I mean, Rush just went for the haul that he did, and me and you weren't all that high on him when he went. Like, what I'm saying is, we saw people financially just overpay for average quarterbacks, and Geno Smith and
I think
Carr.
I think Russell is a good comparison, if I'm being honest with you. You think about how old Russell Wilson was when he gets traded 33 over 33. This is a 26-year-old quarterback. Like, this is a guy who's going to be 26 years old. This is a guy who's already won an MVP, who has the ceiling that every team would be dying to have. And because he's had a couple of off years in what you were referring to as a Pop Warner system, like, teams know this, right? If you and I can see the value that Lamar Jackson has, of course, real NFL front offices know what the value is there as well. In that context, you look at what Russell Wilson got traded for. At the minimum, that should be Lamar Jackson's value, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Which, it's again, there has to be a smokescreen play here, because there's no way with the way that teams fawn over average quarterbacks when they feel like they're a quarterback away. The Jets told Derek Carr he'd be a fucking Hall of Famer if he won a ring with the Jets. Like, I mean, this is not abnormal. Like, we're going to see the market flesh out for Jimmy G when it comes. Like, Derek Carr again, like with New Orleans, they're refusing to rebuild. To them, having an average quarterback that's going to win them their 8 games every year, like they love to do, is good enough for them. Lamar Jackson is not an average quarterback. He's better than that. Yeah. Like, you can't sit here and tell me that's not the case. Like, that there's a smoke screen that we just don't know yet. And I think it's because I think because we're working with a space of time that we're also working with a league that things change really quick. Like, when they say trades are imminent, we get a Schefter tweet 10 minutes after that, or whoever, Rappaport, whoever. Like, so I'm starting to lean towards he will be gone, even though I predicted last week that he would stay. Because and I even texted you this before, like other people were, but I was seeing, I'm not saying like, oh, I was the first or anything, but it made sense to me from the Ravens standpoint. We've done all this negotiating. You think you're worth this. See if another team's going to be able to pay that. And if they are, then we were wrong. And I will do that. But because teams also know that, I think they're playing a no nonsense game here. We're not, just like we've both said a couple times already, we're not going to let that happen. We're not wasting our time negotiating and then you just wind up matching. There needs to be something. I mean, I think teams just know that they're not getting along right now. Lamar is not at the negotiating table with the Ravens. And you can make an argument that he's never been at the negotiation. It hasn't been a negotiation. It's been, this is my number, and if you can't do it, you can't do it. To a point where, does that fester? Does Lamar feel so disrespected at this point that even if they hit that number, that it's just not enough anymore? Like, the number doesn't matter anymore. I'm done with you. You know what I mean? Like,
so I thought that would be the case as soon as he got franchise tagged. Like, as soon as he gets hit with that tag, it's like, all right, well, there's no repairing this relationship. Like, I did all of this for this team. I won an MVP. Yada yada yada. You clearly don't value me the way that I believe you should, and I think that is a very real thing. I'm just taking a look like at Russell Wilson's contract and just contracts in general. So Russell got a 5-year deal for $242.5 million with a guaranteed signing, but with a guaranteed money, $124 million. So maybe that's kind of the route you go. Maybe you do 5 years, $250 million for Lamar Jackson. You give him the $50 million per year, probably the number he wants to hit. And then maybe you do like 125 or 130 million guaranteed. I'd probably do that if I'm the Ravens.
How much?
I don't know if he accepts that.
How much guaranteed money was in Kyler's deal?
He got $103 million.
And then to 125? I would do 180. I would do 180 guaranteed. Okay. Yeah. I mean, because again, peak Russ. I'm taking Lamar over. I don't know if I don't and
that I'll agree with you. That I will agree with you on.
But and that's what I'm saying. Like, Kyler, for as electric as he can be, we've seen his ups and downs. The only question mark right now with Lamar is, can you build an offense around him that has success in the postseason? He's 25 years old though, about to be 26. Like, you have time to get and it's all about getting there anyway. You're not going to make the playoffs with a quarterback you take at 1.8.
I agree. It's interesting to see what happens. We almost forgot the another big quarterback conversation, Frank, that we do need to talk about. We'll see. Keep an eye on the Lamar Jackson stuff. We'll see how it really plays out. I think it's going to take some time, regardless, unless something happens very quickly. I think it's either going to be snap of a finger and he's traded, or it'll take a minute before everything gets worked out.
If I can make a quick prediction, Jack, I think this is going to fester into like training camp. This is going to be a long one, I think. Yep.
I agree. The biggest one pertaining to the Bears, and then Frank, I know we're going to push our rookie rankings, and that's totally fine with me. Maybe we'll do quarterbacks and wide receivers together or something like that. Yeah,
we'll figure something out. We talk about these quarterbacks a little bit longer. I mean, but the Lamar thing in particular is so layered that I don't know how you have the conversation without bringing up the actual layers. You know what I mean?
Agreed, and I think it's a great conversation to have. I'm curious what our listeners maybe think about, Lamar, where they think he might go. I still think he's probably going to get moved. That's just my thought, but we'll
I'm
kind of
leaning
see.
there as
But
well.
I
And
do want to
it's
touch on. Oh, go ahead. No,
I
go
was just
ahead.
gonna say it's funny because last week I'm
You were
almost
like,
at a
he's
180 because I
Ravens.
was like, there's no
Yeah.
way he leaves, and it looks like that's going to be the case.
Um, I do want to touch on some of the free agents that the Bears might be able to get because I do think it's a good conversation to have, especially if we get a couple right. I want to be on the forefront of that. But the other big piece that could affect the Bears, not directly, but indirectly, Aaron Rodgers. Sounds like, according to Adam Schefter, that Jordan Love is going to be gearing up and ready to go for his first full season as a starter. Aaron Rodgers will. Sounds like he could very well be on his way to New York. Just continue the tradition of. So does that mean he'll play for Minnesota after he plays in New York? They'll get rid of Kirk Cousins and then bring in Aaron Rodgers and just go full cycle with it. How's that going to work?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a phenomenal question, Jack.
Frank, let me ask you this. The Jets went full court press with Derek Carr. Like you said, they basically told him you'll be a fucking, you'll get your goddamn jersey retired. You get a statue out front, MetLife Stadium, if you come and play for the Jets. They didn't get him. They did not get Derek Carr. Doesn't it almost feel like they have to get Aaron Rodgers now or else they're kind of fucked?
I mean, because do you trot Mike White out for a full year?
Man,
you get Jimmy G. Jimmy G is an improvement over those guys, but ceiling wise, we sort of know what he is. That's my take on it. Is you have to go all out. But the thing is, the reports are coming out that Green Bay isn't expecting what they would have gotten last offseason, the 2 or 3 firsts, and the Russell Wilson package. They're not expecting that. They're expecting,
as they should.
Yeah, they're expecting fair compensation, which to me probably means a first and maybe a next year's third or something. And you take on all the salary, and that would be it.
Yeah, I think the Packers kind of fucked themselves with this whole situation, and not to totally blame them. I do think, they do deserve some blame because it's fun to blame them, but to be fair, Aaron Rodgers has not made this process any easier as well. It just doesn't make sense to me why Aaron Rodgers would want to leave Green Bay. I understand the team isn't exactly set up to, as best as it possibly. If you look roster for roster, you're probably taking the Jets versus the Packers, right? That's probably just very true. But I'm just talking personality wise, where Aaron Rodgers is at these days with the media, he's gonna have to deal with the New York media. The Green Bay media are his buddies. They're very nice to him. They do not press him the way that other towns, including Chicago, probably would for some of just the shit he says. He's got a very Green Bay does a lot for him, right? They set up everything for him. Outside of the wide receivers, but that's a whole other story. If I'm the Jets, if you do this, if you trade for Aaron Rodgers, you're basically giving yourself a 1-year window. It's basically Super Bowl or bust because you're going to be giving up a first-round pick for him, most likely, even though I don't think he's necessarily worth that. But then you're going to go through the drama all over again of am I retiring? Do I want to stay? I don't know. If I'm the Jets, I'm trying to get out. Can I maybe get Jared Goff? Some a player like that. Can we get someone else who's not gonna come into your franchise and just basically fucking ruin it?
Yeah, I think that's what these meetings are for. Granted, Aaron Rodgers has become a little bit more of a loose cannon over the last few years, but you would think that that's part of the discussion. You come over, eat some dinner together, drink some wine together, and let's just be real. Because just like you said, I would assume anytime New York signs big-time free agents in any sport, they have to be prepping these athletes about how fucking crazy their media is. right? Like it's just being real about the situation. So, I mean, that would be a part of my conversation there is like, look, you got away, and I don't want to say got away. That sounds harsh, but like you did things in Green Bay that probably wouldn't be looked at the same way in New York. They're going to lambaste you. We have a lot more media. They're a lot harsher. We haven't won in a while. The Jets haven't, I mean. And you're going to be looked at as the savior. So like, we need you to like tone some things down or just play ball with the media and like not strong arm them like you can get away with in Green Bay. But yeah, I sort of struggle with it though, Jack, because part of me is like, their core is all on rookie deals. Let's just say Aaron Rodgers goes there and fizzles out after a year or two. You can still re-sign Garrett Wilson and all the other young guys and Breece Hall if he, gets healthy and continues to ascend. This is them like going for it, but not handcuffing themselves.
Sure.
So I like it. I mean, they're the only team in the league that I feel that way about. Where else can he go? That you feel like you would be able to recover from it if he just completely fizzles out and retires after this year. You're going to be the same. You're going to still be looking for a quarterback next year, sure, but like other than that, you're not giving up your core by any means. You're not completely selling out your future because they're not expecting the haul that they would have gotten last year, and they're so young and talented that I just truly think like going for it for a year or two isn't the worst thing.
I mean, I guess it really can't get any worse than it did last year with Zach Wilson, right? Like in terms of personality, in terms of stories that they really had, like Aaron Rodgers would probably be an upgrade from Zach Wilson just in that department as a player, obviously. It's just like, to answer your earlier question, like if I'm the Falcons, I probably don't give up 2 firsts for Lamar Jackson. If I'm the Jets, if I'm in the situation the Jets are in with the roster they have, fuck it. Here's 2 firsts. Let's give them the money.
For Lamar.
That's what I would do for Lamar. If I'm the Jets, I'm doing that 100%. Because I think, obviously, Lamar Jackson has a better future career, than Aaron Rodgers does. He just gives you a bigger window. And he's already, he's also an MVP. You know what I'm saying? Like, and part of me too, I still, I can't let go of the fact that I just can't picture Aaron Rodgers not playing for the Green Bay Packers. Like, I just can't, until it happens, I just won't believe it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, but there is something, and I don't, maybe people in Green Bay know the stories a little bit better than we do, or like are in the little bit of the know. Something has been festering between him and, I don't know if it's the GM, what is his name, Gutekunst, or the Matt LaFleur. Something is bothering him there. And that's very clear. That's why I was pretty surprised that they signed the extension that they did, because he doesn't seem happy there anymore. To a point where he brought up last offseason, like he didn't know that Devontae was getting traded. Like that's something that he felt like he should have been in the know about. So he seems to be extremely unhappy in Green Bay at this point. I'm not saying he's been unhappy the whole time, his whole tenure, but it's come to a point where I think they're both over each other.
Yeah, I think it's best for both to move on. I just don't believe it'll happen because I just can't see it happen.
So, but that's my thing though. I don't think he plays in Green Bay next year. I think if there's no agreement with a team for a trade, I think he's retiring. I don't think there's a shot he goes back.
Okay. Well, this will be one we kind of chalk up to waiting to see what happens.
Yeah.
But obviously, from a Bears perspective, it's very interesting that they could be losing their biggest pain in the ass.
But Jack, and you know what? I'm gonna go on a little mini rant here.
Do it.
And it's based on a post from Reddit, but this also just is a sentiment of Chicago fans in general. But we're a Bears podcast, so we'll talk about the Bears fans. There was a post on Reddit that was like, man, am I the only one that doesn't want to see Aaron Rodgers traded? That was like the header. And then in the body, it was like, I just, now that we're going to be an ascending team, like I just wanted to beat him a few more times or a few times on the way out. And it's like, dude, why, what about Chicago fans I've seen this with the Bulls more than anyone else, but like the Bears, there's some Bears fans that have this thing that like that we just have these fans that think that we're like really good franchises. And I don't know.
Confidence.
Yeah, where does this confidence come from? Like it's okay.
Year,
it's okay to be the Knicks and look at Michael Jordan and say, I hate you and I want you to retire these 2 years. Go play baseball. Keep playing. Be really good at baseball too. And like sign a huge deal with the White Sox. Like you stay there. That's okay. But Chicago fans have this really weird fucking thing that they just swear things are going to turn around and like, no, he doesn't really own us. And like, what like machismo thing do Bears fans have that we're missing? What about like, because what do you lean towards to say that, oh yeah, like we're in prime position to take over Aaron Rodgers? The fucking year that we won the division in 2018, we had trouble we beat him once.
Beat him once.
But that was a struggle. It was like 21-17, and that was a terrible Packers. Not terrible, they weren't, but that was a like below average Packers team. And Aaron Rodgers still kept it close and almost beat us. He was like he was a drive away, a half a drive away from winning that game. Like, where does this come from? It annoys me so much because I'm also seeing it starts to compile. And that's why I said it's a little bit of a rant. Because I'm also seeing it with the Bulls. Oh, yeah, Zach will get it turned around next year. This year's just a little bit. What are you talking about? Where do Chicago fans, like, Chicago fans are infatuated with being average. I've said this, it clicked with me in like 2013. When I saw people more excited about a Derrick Roseless Bulls team and a moving on from Jay Cutler to have Mike Glennon, that was when I knew. That was when I knew you are infatuated with winning 7 games as a Bears fan and convincing yourself that, you know, winning the last 3 games to get to 7 wins is going to carry over in the next year and they're going to do it. To a point where we're coming off, we have the first overall pick. Jack, me and you have dressed things up and we're excited about the future. Well, I'm not saying that we're not, but we've dressed things up to be as positive as we can about the year that transpired.
Right.
And things have gotten to the point with this fan base that they're looking at this like we can beat Aaron Rodgers. How? Where?
He's 23-5 against the Bears in his career. So even if he did play the next 2 years in Green Bay, your best bet is what? If you win all of the games, you're 23-9. That's not owning him out the door. He's just gonna go on his merry way.
But the thing is like, okay, let's say that is the case. It's gonna be chalked up like because what I'm thinking is like this is an ego portion of a Bears fan that's like, yeah, we gotta get him on the way out. Those wins are gonna be chalked up as him being old anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do that in the prime of his career, yeah.
Nope.
So I don't know. It's
and it's a bad Packers team too. It's a weak team. It's just it's always appreciated when Bears fans just try and act like they've always been great, and it hasn't been that way in a very, very, very. It's the 85 stuff, dude. It's the stuff when people just talk about fucking 85 Bears. I'm so fucking sick of hearing.
But again, I don't know.
Bears.
Me too.
Bears,
but I don't know how you can have that mindset as a Bears.
Because you're a Bear. Because you're from Chicago, blue collar, baby.
But that's what I mean. Like, there's this weird ego. There's this weird ego thing that's tied to it. Where like that person, if they listen to this podcast and they make it this far to me saying this, they're calling me a cuck and a pussy and all type of shit because I don't feel that same exact way. Because to them, like their ego was like, yeah, fuck yeah, we can beat Aaron Rodgers, and it's like, what has proven this? Like, we haven't even added any pieces yet. We don't even know what our roster is going to be. So we're rolling out in your mind. We're rolling out the same team that we just had.
Nah, man. Chase Claypool going for 1,400 yards, 12 touchdowns. You shut your mouth. Show him some respect.
But then part of me is also like, because it's the internet, I wonder how much of it is just kids. Because I think back to when I was younger and when Sosa left and we got Jeremy Burnitz, and I was like, fuck yeah, Jeremy Burnitz is just as good as Sammy.
Alfonso Soriano is going to be the greatest thing ever. Jason Hayward's going to be the greatest thing ever. Yeah,
Carlos Boozer.
Yeah, it's just part. Man, that might be the biggest disappointment.
Dare I?
Just like he wasn't a bad player. Like Carlos Boozer was good. He was a fine player. He was a good player for the money he got. Is what it is. But like you're coming off the disappointment, like going from LeBron, D Wade to Chris Bosh potentially. The fucking Carlos Boozer. I mean, come on. What are we doing?
I was disappointed because I wanted David Lee instead of Carlos Boozer.
I don't even know how to wrap my head around that because
you didn't like David Lee in New York.
He's fine. I'd probably take Boozer over him.
But he was younger though, and I thought he had more upside.
Yeah, but Boozer was entertaining. Some good times with Carlos. Frank, let's rapid fire through these the main three we wanted to talk about. You know, I do want to touch on the free agents a little bit because the new league year starts this time next week. So you know, signings will happen pretty quickly. I don't necessarily think the Bears might go crazy. They'll probably be active right away. So you know, by the time we do our episode next week, all of this might already be, old. But the three biggest ones, in my opinion, and maybe you have a couple more on your end, but Orlando Brown, the tackle for the Chiefs, was not tagged, which was kind of a surprise. So he's a free agent. Frank Clark, the pass rusher, Kansas City Chiefs, also not tagged, which also a pretty big surprise. Jerron Hargrave from the Philadelphia Eagles, the defensive tackle, who everybody has been pairing the Bears with since like that Super Bowl ended, basically, as a nice replacement for Deron Payne. 30 years old, a little bit older, but sure, he's a great player. Let's go. And then the last one for me, Bobby Okereke. Bobby Okereke, linebacker of the Colts. He's already being linked to Matt Eberflus. That makes a lot of sense. So, Frank, basically you could fill a tackle spot, your three technique, pass rusher. You still have Justin Jones, obviously. You could draft Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, whoever. We'll get to that a little bit later. Maybe even one of the guys a little bit behind the draft. And then you fill another linebacker spot. That's sure. Sign me up. That all sounds good. Sounds good to me.
I'm all in. I think everything in free agency is going to be an overpay. It is what it is. But you're talking about pieces that solidify the trenches. That also doesn't prevent you from drafting that position still. You have to do it, right? Because the thing is, you're not like signing Stephon Gilmore to a huge contract. And then it's like, well, that position's covered, and if he winds up sucking, we have nothing else. We still have other holes on the line. Like it's not abnormal. Let's say we sign Orlando Brown. He plays left. That you make a decision with Braxton Jones. Does he move over to right? Does he play left guard? But then maybe Paris Johnson, or is last name Johnson?
Yep.
The last names are killing me. Paris Johnson. He's played everywhere on the line. Maybe you sign him and he's your left guard and you swing Braxton over to like. At that point, you're just talking about versatility with your draft picks.
Because Orlando Brown, his best position might not even be left tackle.
It might be right.
He's also played right tackle, so you can leave Braxton Jones at left and put him at right. So I agree. Versatility is the name of the game. Yeah,
and even like, to your Chris Jones point, that would be a huge get.
Frank, I would love Chris Jones. But it's you meant Frank Clark.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why do I always confuse them two? Pass rushers from the Chiefs. I was doing that after the Super Bowl game too.
I was going to say.
But no, regardless, you filled that need, but then we still need a pass rusher. Even after that, like then you can still get Will Anderson. Or we've also been connected to a different. I keep forgetting his name.
Luke Van Ness.
I've heard Van Ness. There was another one though that everyone's saying that Poles is in love with. If we trade back out of the top 10, he'd probably be there. And I'm blanking on.
There's a ton. There's Tyree Wilson.
Tyree Wilson. That's what Tyree Wilson.
Okay.
You pair them. Like you can do so much in these scenarios, but
yeah, I mean that's the thing we've really talked about, right? Like Bears fans who are expecting us to become Super Bowl contenders next year, like pump the brakes a little bit. There's so many holes on this team, which is why when we've talked about trading back, it sounds like Frank is getting a little bit more open to trading back a couple times as well, maybe even closer to 10, maybe even outside of the top 10, because there are just so many holes. And as the combine has gone, and we do obviously want to do our player rankings as well, so we'll get a little bit more into that. There's some names popping up that, like, realistically, I don't know why this happened, but it was like for a long time it was Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, the only prospects you can get. Like, you have to get one of and that's probably the case in terms of ceiling. But there are still really good players you can get while also building your team for the future. So yeah, you could sign all three of the, all four of those guys, or the Ryan McGarry, the Falcons right tackle, who wasn't franchise tag either, Caleb McGarry, excuse me. You can sign all these guys, and you still have holes. Like, there's still so much you need on this team to make it a competitive roster.
But that's the thing, though. The same philosophy that we had, specifically talking about Jack Sanborn, how I would be really upset unless you're drafting the next, like, Brian Urlacher, for sure, if they drafted an inside linebacker, is, again, it's going to be overpays in free agency, but you're talking about above quality, or above starting quality guys, like, that are going to be there for a couple of years. That allows you to fill the holes elsewhere and then maybe reassess next year. But you sign one of these tackles, they are going to start and they're going to do well.
The one thing I really like about this free agency class, and maybe we can, this is sort of where we'll wrap up this episode, is it's very strong in the trenches, and that is exactly the way Ryan Poles has talked about wanting to build his team. Even in the draft, it's a very strong draft on the defensive line. So it gives you more flexibility. And Frank, this is kind of why I want them to make their if they are going to trade this number one pick, I do want it to happen a little bit sooner rather than later. Just because going into free agency, you really know what you need. We're at the 7th overall pick. We traded back with the Raiders. Who's going to be, we think Peter Skoronski will be available. We want to draft him at tackle. Okay. Maybe now we don't need to spend as much money on, we don't need both McGarry and Orlando Brown. Maybe we just get one of them and then move Braxton Jones to the inside. You know what I'm saying? So I would like that to happen so they can start to plan a little bit more.
I agree. But I think you have to go with the sure thing first, because we don't know. The Bears are not going to be the only team that trades within the top 10.
Sure, no, that's fine. I'm just saying, like, yeah, sign as you need it. Of course, I agree. But if they can get good value in the trade and sort of give themselves a better idea of what they think might be available,
right?
That would be ideal for me.
That's fair. So the angle, and I agree with the overall point. My only angle is I want the Bears to trade out of the first spot and ultimately recoup a second round pick, because that's the only way we're getting a receiver. I think a 2 for Hopkins or a 2 for Evans, that I'm predicting one of those two happens. I think Poles knows that. That's why he tried to jump the market with Claypool, and Claypool just isn't, all that good. At least he showed us that last year. Hopefully he improves within the system next year. But even if he does, I don't think anyone ever mistook him for an X. Like, he's not that dude. He's a wide receiver 2 type of guy. That would be nice to be able to do either before the draft or have that draft capital during the draft.
Yeah, I totally agree. You see DeAndre Hopkins, it sounds like there's already a trade market for him. So, does that include the Bears maybe making a couple trades right away? They trade back and then boom, they're already moving, one of those picks to get DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know. I think it's going to have to be something we'll wait and see. But Frank, this has been a good conversation. I really think we touched on a lot of good stuff here today. We'll definitely get to our rookie rankings next week, or unless something crazy, unless the trade down does happen, and then obviously we'll have that to talk about. But we do want to get to that.
That may command an emergency podcast if they trade down.
Might.
Yeah,
it might. So I would say keep an eye out for that if that does happen. But as always, we appreciate you guys listening to the Bear With Us podcast. I'm Jack. He's Frank. We will talk to you guys next week.
Later, Jackie. Later, everybody.
Everybody love everybody!